Hello and welcome to Do You See What I See? Today we have an accomplished and brilliant guest, attorney, activist, executive, Fernando Chavez. Fernando's had an amazing life and a career. He comes from an extraordinary family of contribution and faith and work. And I want to share with you that he has a wonderful story that he's going to tell us today about his experiences, his life. And I'm so delighted to have you with us today, Fernando. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm glad to say that I don't practice law anymore. I now have become a businessman, if you can imagine, after all these years to change professions. But I'm looking forward to it.
Well, that's another shift in your life, and I want to go back because I didn't realize you've been mentored by some of the finest human beings and finest professionals in a variety of fields. And I didn't realize that you had been mentored and worked for Melvin Belli. So I'd like to start with those early days when you first got out of law school and the experiences you had that initiated your career.
Well, even before then, I clerked for Justice Cruz Reynoso, which, as you know, he was not only a great jurist, but a wonderful human being. He was just absolutely, I thought the world of him. And graduated from law school, passed the bar, and I went to work for Melvin Belli. It was a kind of a strange relationship because I wasn't really an employee, but because he had a lot of Hispanic clients, but he had no Hispanic attorneys. So a friend of mine that worked for him.
I lost your audio.
Have Hispanic clients without having some sort of Hispanic representation. So he said, okay, get me somebody. So I went and interviewed, and we had a long talk, and he said, okay, you're going to be perfect for this job. So I did that. I worked with him for about 4 years. And it was a great learning experience. He was bigger than life, as you can imagine. He used to have this office in San Francisco on Montgomery, and people would walk by, and he had he was famous for trial exhibits. He was called the King of Torts, and he's one of the first lawyers that started using trial exhibits, all kinds of stuff. And it was a great experience. It was a great learning experience. And I went on to, have my own practice and practice with a number of other people, and enjoyed it while I did it.
Well, what did you learn from him? Because he was a unique person. I didn't realize that he was born in Mexico.
Mel was a good listener. The thing he always said, you have to, when you're talking to a jury, besides believing you have to believe that what you're saying is the truth, even if it may not be close to the truth, because the jury will see that you're not being honest and you're not being authentic. So, every time I tried a case, I had that in the back of my mind. You need to be authentic. If not, people see through that.
Well, I wouldn't think it'd be too hard for you to be authentic because you had a role model of authenticity, and your experience is working, also working with Justice Cruz Reynoso, who was an attorney for rural legal assistance and was a beautiful human being. I recall him very well. I've interviewed him on television, and he was a great jurist. A great jurist.
Another person I worked for that was, and you know this person very well, Richard Alatorre.
Okay.
The old gang, right? I met Richard. I think I met Richard the same time I met Art Torres. And I was involved intimately in Art's first campaign, and I learned a lot from Richard. I mean, Richard was he played hardball. He was Richard is maybe one of the individuals that's probably most responsible for changing the reapportionment so that we're able to get Latino elected into public office.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And he knew how to play hardball. He was a real political animal when he was in office.
Yeah, he was real political. I just saw him. He had last week, the Family Foundation honored Richard for his 50 years of service to the Hispanic community, Latino community.
Yes, yes, yeah. It's been a long time. We're all looking back. Well, you're not. You're still a young man. But many of us are looking back, 50 years and are now the elders. We're supposed to be the wise wisdom figures, and I think all of us are feeling very compelled to capture as much of the history and set it right, create the narratives, because it has to be done. We're getting ready for a requiring ethics studies as a high school graduation requirement in 2024. So this is one of the reasons I'm doing these interviews of the luminaries that were originally, and it's all but I'll be expanding out from there so that we have these narratives, we have the stories. But let's go back and look at the legal career that you had was quite dynamic. You were mentored by various people. You also did a stint with Senator Ted Kennedy in politics, another piece of your background. What did you learn from Kennedy?
He was Senator Kennedy was he was a really compassionate man. He was really believed in what he did, trying to put people on equal footing. I don't think he gets as much credit as he deserves, but I think he's one of the great U.S. senators of the past century.
Well, he was.
Yeah, he was.
He got things done.
Yeah, he got things done. He knew how to talk to people. Never talked down to people, and I had a tremendous amount of respect for him. And that's one of the reasons I went to work for him during the campaign. It didn't turn out very well, but Senator Kennedy was he was a lion. He was a lion of the Senate.
And also you had the greatest mentor in the world, who was your father. He was the founder of the United Farm Workers Union. He was an organizer. He was a great leader. He was a labor leader and a very spiritual man. And I would say in the league of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And he was a household word. How did that impact you growing up? It couldn't have been easy because you had to travel all over the state. The life of the farm worker was travel and moving, and you were in maybe 10 or 12 cities around California and Nelson. How did that impact you?
I think between the first grade and maybe the seventh grade, I think we lived in at least 10 cities. So what would happen is never had time to make friends because sometimes we were only in school for a semester. When you're a kid, you're trying to make friends. It's not easy and it takes a while. So my best friends were my brothers and sisters. And we spent a lot of time playing together, playing games, doing all kinds of things that I think that a lot of families who have children don't, because they have other friends. We didn't have other friends. We had ourselves. We were not only brothers and sisters, but we were very close. And that was a different dynamic. One dynamic I did learn was because I was the eldest and I had 5 sisters. So I learned pretty early on kind of a female dynamic just by being around my sisters. And that served me well in my whole life. I was always respectful of women. I always treated them as equal. because my sisters were like my equal. So I never had, thank goodness, I never had to deal with that issue or have someone confront me about being a macho or not being a chauvinist. And I think that part of that was because I had such a deep and close relationship with my sisters. But one of the stories that impacted me, and it's probably a story that no one knows, but I was probably 13. I was already driving because I would drive my father to and from places, and he would sleep in the car, and we'd go on country roads because there wasn't a lot of traffic. So what he would do is he'd play a game, and he'd say, okay, we're going to go and leave at this community, farm worker community. And then after we do that, we're going to go to the park and have a barbecue, and we're going to play volleyball. And that was his way. And I'll get some sweets. That was his way to get myself and my brothers and sisters at least accepting of the fact that we had to go out and leaflet this community, knowing that at the end of the 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 hours when we were doing it, we'd have something to do. So that was pretty much the modus operandi. We'd leaflet these communities, and then a week later he'd have a meeting. So we leaflet the community, and we have a meeting, and the meetings were usually set on Sundays because people worked on Monday through Saturday. So Sunday at I think like 5 o'clock, and it was they called them house meetings. So he'd get a family to put up their house, make coffee. My dad would bring in donuts and sweet bread and Mexican sweet bread and what have you. And the idea was that's where the organizing started, telling people about the significance of a union, what it could mean, all that, kind of laying the groundwork for unionization, educating the workers. And I remember that we get to the house. It started at 5. We get there like at 4:45, and we set up. And the people who had set it up were a little nervous because this was not something that was done, and kept looking out the window. So 5:30 comes along, nobody shows up. 6, nobody shows up. 6:30, pretty much gonna call it a day. Nobody shows up. So he thanked the family, and they apologized. We're so sorry. And he said, no, don't worry, it's not your fault. So we left, and we're driving back, and I remember it's raining. This happened 60 years ago, and it's like imprinted in my mind. We're driving back, and I'm driving, and he's sitting in the passenger seat, and I can tell he looks like he's sleeping, but I can tell he's not sleeping. And so I said, Dad, why didn't people come today? I mean, I'm 13. And he said, it's because people are afraid. I said, afraid of what? Well, he said, we're organizing, and they're afraid of maybe a grower or a foreman or a contractor sees them there. They're afraid they might lose their job. I said, oh, okay. Okay. I took it at face value. So we go back the next week, and we do the same thing. And same result. Nobody shows up. And we're driving home, and I said, people didn't come because they're afraid. And he said, yes. I said, well, I guess we're not going to come back. He said, oh, we're going to come back. I said, we are? He said, yes. He says, we're going to come back. But before we come back, we have to work harder. I said, harder? He goes, yes. People are afraid, and we have to make them comfortable. We have to work harder. We have to work twice as hard as we worked to show people that they don't need to fear coming to the house meeting. And I said, but why are people going to come? If they're afraid now, what makes them, what's going to happen in another week that's going to make him, lose that fear? He said, hard work. We have to double the efforts. And we just, when we go to drop a leaflet off, we have to talk to people. I mean, we're 13, my sisters are 12, and we're trying to talk to people, explain to people. So he gives us a script, and we practice with him. And he has us giving this script. I'm telling people, this is a meeting about, joining a union, and, it's going to change your life. It's going to make better working conditions. And I'm not sure that my sisters, which were younger, understood really what that meant, other than it was kind of just a dialogue that they were doing. But we went back the third week. 2 people came back. The fourth week, maybe 7 people. He must have gone to that house 7 or 8 times before he finally had a packed house. And I remember the first time we went, we got home, and my mother asked my father, how did it go? And he said, mother, it didn't go very well. He would call my mother, mother, because it didn't go very well. And he said, I have to work harder. I'm not working hard enough. And I just thought, wow, the ability to have that kind of resiliency, that kind of determination and perseverance is just, that's just, that's hard to imagine, that kind of perseverance. So the one thing that people ask me, what do you think your father instilled in you? And that's it. The idea that you have to have perseverance if you want to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. So that to me was my biggest lesson. And, it's kind of, dust yourself off, get up and do it again until it gets done.
And he taught you other things. I remember from your contribution to the Caridad charity chapter, and it's all the frijoles, that he taught you compassion. He taught you the love and appreciation of your fellow human beings. He taught you to a pathway of nonviolence, of grace, of dignity, like you say, resilience and persistence, and all of those things. But he taught you some very deep virtuous qualities. And he had a tremendous faith. He couldn't have done what he did without having that deep belief in God and in the dignity of human being.
If there's one thing that I can say that was a motivating and compelling factor, was his faith, without a doubt. It's absolutely without a doubt. And my grandmother played a pretty big role in that. But I remember we lived in a 2-bedroom house with 10 people, 8 children and my parents. And it was not uncommon for my dad to bring somebody.
Yeah.
Just somebody was hitchhiking. We pick up and my mother said, "Who's this?" He said, "I don't know, but it was raining. We picked him up. He needs a place to sleep. He needs a place to sleep, and he needs some food." And getting home at 11 o'clock, my mother, getting out of bed to make food for this complete, total stranger.
Yeah. Well, that is caridad. That is truly caring for your fellow brother and sister. And that's what you're taught in the Bible. And that's one of the very important qualities in our culture at our best, is that grace and that taking care of others, even when they are strangers and we don't know them. Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. No, that was a very common occurrence in our household. We'd always have strangers that would come and spend 2-3 days. My mother looking for a place to, after spend a couple of days with us, to put them up somewhere, find a place for them to stay. Always feeding people. Just these memories I have of growing up. I remember one time I think things were pretty bad. So he said, okay, they just finished tilling and picking a field of potatoes. He said, guys, guess what we're going to do? We're going to go pick potatoes. Pick potatoes. Yes, we're going to go pick potatoes. I'm going to show you how to pick potatoes. So we get these gunny sacks and we go and we pick like 5 of them. They disced the field and it left a lot of potatoes. It's pretty common. And we filled them up. And I remember for about the next 4 weeks, 5 weeks, baked potatoes, mashed potatoes, French fries, scalloped potatoes, baked potato, you name it. It was like potatoes. I mean, coming out of your ear. And my little brother would say, potatoes again. Yeah, it was an interesting dynamic growing up. I remember, I think it was Johnson. They offered my dad the directorship of the Peace Corps for Latin America and South America, which was a pretty prominent position back then. And he said, we have to make a decision. This is going to be a family decision. I've been offered this position. So he said, and he was really good at this. He did this the whole time. He says, I'm going to put the pros and the cons. And then we're going to have a family vote. It's going to be a secret ballot vote. So he tore up his little papers there and he said, take the job, yes, no. So he says, this is why we take the job. We take the job because we won't have to live in a 2-bedroom house. We'll probably have people that will cook for us and clean for us. And we'll probably have a big house. And who knows, you might each have your own room. And you'll go to better schools. And you're probably going to eat a lot better food. And your mother won't have to work so hard, on and on and on. Okay, so and then if we don't go, it's because I want to stay in organized farm workers. And then he goes through this whole thing about farm workers and their struggle and their kids' struggle. It was, I mean, I don't think he intended to be as dramatic as it was, but it was. And so he gives us the ballots. And of course, I mean, there's a tear rolling down his eye. And he gives us a ballot, and of course, he starts reading them. Opens them up. He says, to go, no. 1, no. 2, and he said, I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to vote. 2, no. 3, we got to about 7, no. And then we get a yes to take the position. Yeah. That's a yes. And he turns like, yes. And he and my brother sister said, who said yes? Who said yes? And my little brother pipes up. He said, I said yes. He goes, I'm tired of eating potatoes. I'm tired of sleeping on the floor. I want to have a bed and I want to eat better food. He was like 8 or 9. But that's kind of how we were raised. We were raised with, the importance of service to others. That was big. That was big. Charitable and always speaking up when you see an injustice. That was our 3 or 4 things that we were raised. Those were the principles of our upbringing. Fairness,
very important principles.
Yeah.
Principles. It's interesting how consistently these themes run through our activist culture. I just interviewed Dolores Huerta in March. Mm-hmm. And one of the things she said, that her mother told her the same thing. If you see something that is wrong, it is your duty and responsibility to do something about it.
Right.
And my mother taught me that as well when I was 8 years old. If you see something that is wrong, it is your duty and responsibility to do something about it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
that's how we were raised. And one of the things about nonviolence was it's for me it was tough because it didn't come naturally to me to be nonviolent. I had a lot of altercations in school, and even though I tried, it was very, very tough. And sometimes I was not able to resist striking back. But as time went on, and I got drafted, and my dad said, because my dad served in the Navy, he was in the U.S. Navy, and he said, well, this was the height of the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, I hadn't really thought about, being a resistor, conscientious objector. But after, talking to him and talking to other people, I said, I think I'm going to apply for conscientious objector status. So I applied and I was denied. And I remember I took a year off because I went to UCLA, but I didn't go right after high school. I took a year off. It was during that year that I was drafted. I didn't have a deferment or anything. But I remember I was working in this factory, and I remember that they called my name. And, the loudspeaker, they called my name, and I washed my hands and I went to the office, and there was two federal agents who arrested me, put my hands behind my back in handcuffs. And to go out of the building, you have to go through a main corridor, and they marched me through the main corridor. And like I could see everybody looking at me. I mean, I was like so embarrassed because they thought maybe, I'd committed some heinous crime, that I had robbed a bank or killed somebody. And it was just like, oh my God, it was devastating. That was one of the most humiliating experiences I've ever had in my life. And, but I decided that I was going to be a conscientious objector, and I actually went to a trial in Fresno. And I was fortunate enough to have a tremendous lawyer who at that time I was 20 and he was like 26 or 27. He was a professor of con law and evidence at UCLA. Went on to become very, very distinguished lawyer by the name of Michael Tiger. And he got me acquitted. It wasn't acquitted; it was a directed verdict actually by the judge. But that also taught me another thing: is boy, it sure as hell helps to have good legal representation, no matter what the accusation is. That's one of the other things, and I think also partially that was responsible for me, becoming a lawyer.
Well, because you would have seen, and your father had to take how many of the situations he had to go to court to get rulings that would favor the farm workers, because you had goon squads that were trying to suppress everything, and you had this quest for the right action. He had to go to court. I would think he would have said to you, "Be a lawyer, because that'll be a great thing to help." But he didn't do that with you.
No, he didn't. He never really pushed me into, when I went up to college, he said, "Oh, it's good, go get an education." But he never really pushed me to become a lawyer or a doctor, or even, be a union organizer. To do with my life. So that was good, because there was a lot of pressure for me to follow in his footsteps. And I told Art this once years ago. I said, "Man, that's the best thing I ever did, because you just can't follow those footsteps."
There's only one pair of feet like that and one human being like that. Yes, those are rare human beings. I mean, we had the Gandhi, we had Martin Luther King, and we had Cesar Chavez.
Right. It's it's a special human being. Who knows what makes them up? Who knows how they come to be? But it's something that moves and motivates them and drives them to follow their belief and follow a just and righteous cause.
But you carried forward so much of your father and of the experiences that you lived as a young man, a boy and a young man, in your own life, championing underserved people, being involved in huge multi-million-dollar class action suits on behalf of the underserved and people who might not otherwise.
Well, I always prided myself that I almost always represented the underdog. No, not almost, always represented the underdog. Trying to create an equal footing and equal playing field for injured workers, people who are taken advantage of, people who are abused. And so that gave me a lot of pleasure doing that. What I didn't like about the law was it's conflict. It's conflict. And I wish I could say it's conflict resolution. No, it's conflict. Conflict, continuous conflict from the time you get up to the time you go to bed. It's the nature of the beast. And after 35 years, it's just enough is enough. So I never encouraged my children to become lawyers. One of my sons said, "Do you think I should go to law school?" I said, "Well, let me give you my personal experience." He said, "I think you're right. I'm going to find something else to do." But yeah, it's not for everyone, and I don't have anything against lawyers. It's just that, God, it's a hell of a way to make a living.
Well, it is the conflict, and one has to be a tough person, to be able to confront a lot of the things that have to be confronted in a courtroom.
Right.
To fight on behalf of the right when there's so much wrong going on, and it's a difficult path. It is a difficult path to take. You did it with great humanity, though. Your peers would say that the fruit didn't fall far from the tree, that you were always a gentleman, that you carried yourself and conducted yourself with dignity, and you weren't ugly in your representations. You did what you thought was right, and you were articulate in how you handled the cases, and you had the tenacity of your father to plow through all that stuff and to have that career, because it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. But I always try to practice with humility and a sense of fairness. I never understood why someone would be so aggressive when there's no need. I mean, we're adults. Why be aggressive? But some lawyers think that that's the best way to play hardball, and that you'll get everything you want. It doesn't always work that way. And juries see it. Actually, the easiest thing is getting in front of a jury, because then that levels the playing field 100%.
So juries are very important. Well, shifting gears and talking about juries and judges, what advice would you give to the voting public, to the public in general, about how we go about deciding who we're going to select as judges? We have some opportunities to vote for judges in certain instances. In other cases, we didn't have any say in the selection of our Supreme Court justices in recent years, certainly.
Right.
And what do we need to do to have some kind of body that vets these people? I know in California, in 2017, I served as a public member of the California State Bar Judicial Nominees Evaluation Committee. Mm-hmm. And we put those judges, and they were all qualified, and that they submitted, they were qualified in their mind. but we had various rankings, and we really vetted them. We went deep background checks. We sent out gazillions of letters and notices and everything else to try to find out anything. If anybody had any questionable knowledge, questionable activity, or behavior on the part of the candidate, they would be considered not qualified. Justice Kavanaugh would never have made it in California through our committee,
Right.
in terms of integrity and all the rest of the issues that one needs to have. If you had any kind of consideration of harassment or sexual abuse or any kind of things like that, activities like that, dishonesty, anything like that, you would be immediately disqualified as unqualified. Sure.
Well,
how do we correct that? How do we rectify that?
It's like anything else. You have to educate the public in terms of, for the longest time, and early on, I was even guilty of this. I would vote for a judge. Sometimes I wouldn't even, check off the box if I really didn't know him. But it's an education process. Look what just happened yesterday in Wisconsin. The amount of money that was spent on that, but that was also very educational for the public in terms of, who they wanted on the bench. Did they want someone who is going to be, pro-choice and knew how they were going to vote on legislation that was going to come up? Someone who was going to, protect the old guard in terms of reapportionment. So, a lot of money was spent on those that judicial race, but it was an eye-opening experience, and I think the public learned a lot. And maybe that's what it's going to take in other states to make sure that you get, people on the bench who have a sense of fair play and a sense of dignity and respect for individuals and things of that nature.
And to have character counts. And we've seemed to have dismissed it more recently in recent years, that people aren't looking at the character of the person. It's what they say, blah, blah, blah. And one of the reasons I love interviewing all of you that contributed to Soul of Liberty Helmet is because you represent the virtues that are in the book. There are 14, that are there and identified. And it's very important to teach these things to our children.
Absolutely.
To teach them in law school,
Sure. Because the fact of the matter is that most people who are up for judicial appointments, almost all of them are qualified. But really what you want to look at is you want to look at character. You want to look at the character of the person. You want to look at temperament. There's some people who are eminently qualified and have no damn business sitting on the bench. They just don't have judicial temperance. They don't have any set of, and just, they're rude, they're obnoxious, and, they get appointed and it gets worse. So, character is, because they're all qualified. Most of them are qualified. It's character is, boy, that's the main ingredient to see what kind of person, you're going to put up there that's going to make determinations legal determinations across the board.
Well, the lack of character could be a disqualifying characteristic. I think that's one of the things we have to start looking at, and that needs to be a factor. And I know we looked at that in California on the Jenny Commission. It was fascinating. I was very impressed by the diligence with which the selections were made, the recommendations were made to the governor as to, from his list. Very important things. So what would you say to young people when they're thinking about their careers, if they are going to go into law? How do we prepare them in school so that they have these adaptable skills, these qualities of character, of ethics, of morals, which has to carry you a long way?
Sure. Well, I think the law school curriculum is it's been the same for, I don't know, 100 years. One thing that I think really needs to change is you need to get they offer it. Most law schools have a clinic. I think it should be mandatory so that people are actually involved in real legal real legal practice, because it's more than just writing a brief. That's a small part of it. dealing with clients. How do you interact with clients? The type of cases you're going to take, and also give the student an opportunity to see, I'm not, I don't want to do corporate stuff. I'm kind of interested in criminal law, and also not just criminal law, but it's easy to go and be a DA. It's much tougher to be a public defender. You're starting out with a strike against you. A lot of kids don't want to be public defenders, but I think it gives you a eye-opening experience of what it's like, and I wouldn't even mind seeing a clinic where part of the clinic is in the public defenders and part of the clinic is in the prosecutor's office.
That would be interesting. That would be a really good addition. That should be one of your recommendations. Yeah. So what's next for you? There was some news that you might look to doing a radio show. Is that still on the table?
No, I don't. I'm not. I don't have the patience for that. I'm getting into food, the food business, with blockchain technology, in terms of working with this company who has taken, for example, let's try it in Malaysia, where they took 50 individuals, fishermen, and the government gave them a cell phone, and they developed programs, and they taught them how to use it, so that they were able to take their product and go directly to a buyer and get rid of the middleman, and using some of those funds to be able to educate their children, build schools, and things of that nature. So I think that's kind of the direction I'm heading in. I find that interesting and fascinating. Groups of in Guatemala, where we have indigenous people who are doing the same thing, where they're starting to, they have a crop or product, they're actually can sell it to a producer, and with a blockchain technology, we're able to see where the product, who the person is that picks the product, grows the product, who the person is that produces the product, and you see this whole chain of the product until it ends up in the store. And you can actually now you can do the barcode, and you look at the barcode, and you can follow that product from the day it was planted to the day it's harvested to the day it arrives in the store. Yeah, and also the pesticides that were used on it and everything of that nature. So I think that's kind of interesting. That's kind of the new chapter in my life.
Well, it sounds very interesting, and we're going to look for great things from you continuously. You've had a fascinating life. I want to thank you for sharing your experiences with us. And before I let you go, I again want to acknowledge with prayers and love the loss of your mother. I wish you and your family grace and much support and faith during this time of transition. Thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been a wonderful conversation, and we'll have to cycle back again because I know that there's a lot more to talk about. Thank you.
I think a great guest for you would be my son, Eduardo. He did a documentary, which is very interesting, and I'm going to email you the link so you can listen to it. What it is that I'll tell you a really quick funny story. We grew up, from where I grew up and they grew up, are worlds apart. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house with 10 people. He grew up in a very affluent neighborhood in Northern California, Hillsborough. We had a big house, very big house. And so he would tell me, I think it's very unfair what you did to me. I said, what did I do to you, Eduardo? He said, I know Grandpa Caesar the way that any other person knows him, only but what they've read and what they see. I don't know him through personal stories. I don't know him through any other eyes. I must as well just be somebody off the street who starts to read about him. And I said, oh, okay. I'm sorry, I was never my intent. So he said, I want to do something about it. So he says, I'm going to make a documentary. Oh, I said, that's a great idea. A documentary of me getting to know him through other experiences. He says, where do I start? I said, well, they always say, if you want to know what it's like, why don't you walk in that person's shoes? Because what do you mean? I said, I have an idea. Why don't you go for a month or two and be a farm worker? That's going to tell you a lot about what your grandfather believed, why he believed it, and what people had to endure. Because I can tell you something, it has not changed in 60 years. Yeah. It's still the same damn hard work, back-breaking work. So he did that. The first day he took the job, he said, Dad, I don't know if I can do this. And he's young, he's strong, he goes, I don't know if I can do this. I said, well, how are you going to do the documentary? He ended up doing it. And he now shows his documentary at colleges across the state. As a matter of fact, right now, he's on tour, as he calls it, at about 12 or 13 colleges across the country, where, he shows the film, and then the student body, interacts, asks questions, and he's gotten pretty good. He's become a pretty good speaker just by, having done this already about 100 and some times. But I think he'd be a good guest for you.
I would love that. I would love that. That's exciting. Well, it's always great to see what our children do.
Exactly.
They turn out to be because of the experiences that they've had and the advantages they've had. My daughter's a lawyer. She's an entertainment lawyer. Danielle's an entertainment and Joaquin's in politics. So go figure. They followed in footsteps, really, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it, and hopefully, I'll see you sooner than 20 years from now.
Well, I hope you come back to California.
Yeah, I hope so too. All right. Yeah, take care.
It's been great. Thank you so much, Fernando. And to our audience, be sure and tune in again next month. I have entertainment executive Nellie Gallant as a guest. Thank you so much for joining me on See What I See. I'm Nava.